Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Strategy Thesis, Bitcoin and the Future of Capital. My name is Adam Livingston, and today I'm going to be walking you through why Strategy's Bitcoin strategy is representing the most unique opportunity in the financial markets today. When we talk about asymmetric bets, and I believe MSTR is the most asymmetric bet of the century, we are looking for opportunities where the potential upside far outweighs the potential downside. In my analysis, MSTR's approach to Bitcoin is creating precisely this type of opportunity, and it's one that occurs perhaps once in a generation. Certainly, we've never seen this type of capital innovation in our lifetime. And really what's making it so compelling isn't just about Bitcoin itself, though that's certainly part of the equation. It's really about how the company is positioning itself to become what I'm calling a Bitcoin bank. It is leveraging corporate finance to amplify exposure in what may be the most important monetary innovation of our lifetimes. Now, to understand the significance of strategy, we must first recognize the fundamental shifts that are occurring in our global monetary system, and we are witnessing what I call the new paradigm. It is a breaking point in traditional finance that is creating the perfect environments for the ascendance of Bitcoin. First, let's address what I'm calling decaying fiat. Traditional currencies are losing value at an accelerating pace. Central banks worldwide are continuing unprecedented money printing, expanding their balance sheets way beyond anything that would have been previously thought as imaginable. Certainly in the last 5 years, if you've been cognizant of the inflation since COVID, I mean, we just continue to see whether it's US dollars, euros, yen, they're dying slowly but surely through this process of monetary debasement. Simultaneously, we're also experiencing broken bonds. The bond market, which was once the cornerstone of wealth preservation, is now offering negative real returns after accounting for this inflation. Sovereign debt's exploding globally with no realistic repayment path. Even as nominal yields rise, they simply cannot keep pace with the true inflation rates that are out there. In this macro environment, there's one asset that is totally untouched by this manipulation, and that is Bitcoin. And there is one company that's really positioning itself to benefit from that revolution, and that is Strategy. Now, unlike traditional corporations that are holding cash reserves that are depreciating, the cash on these balance sheets are just melting like ice cubes. MSTR has engineered a corporate restructure that leverages Bitcoin's properties at scale. Now, before we dive deeper into Strategy's approach, let's establish a foundational understanding of Bitcoin itself, because you got to ask yourself, what makes Bitcoin unique among all the assets in human history? Well, first, Bitcoin offers absolute scarcity, and it's the only asset that does that. Only 21 million will ever exist. This isn't a promise or a policy that can be changed. It's mathematically guaranteed by the protocol itself. No government, corporation, or individual can inflate it. No authority can create more. This makes Bitcoin fundamentally different from every other form of money that we've ever known. Now, second, Bitcoin's decentralized architecture eliminates all vulnerabilities that are inherent in centralized systems. There's no single point of failure, no central authority to corrupt it or capture it, and no confiscation can ever allow it for asset seizure. This is a network that continues operating even if entire countries attempt to shut it down. Now, third, Bitcoin has demonstrated unmatched performance as an investment. It has been the best performing asset of the last decade, period. No other investment has even come close to its compound annual growth rate, despite all the significant volatility along the way. Now, finally, Bitcoin offers energy-backed security. It is protected by both mathematics and electricity via proof of work, and the Bitcoin network has been proven unhackable at a global scale. As its hash rate continues to grow, so does its security, creating a virtuous cycle of increasing robustness. Now, the case for Bitcoin becomes even more compelling when we examine the larger macroeconomic picture, particularly what I call the global debt crisis. I don't know if I just call it that. I think everybody's calling it that. But we currently face over $300 trillion in global debt. That is an unprecedented level of sovereign obligations that can never be repaid through traditional economic activity. This debt can only be addressed through default or debasement, with obviously the latter being the politically expedient choice. That's a lot more popular for sure. So that's what we're living through. While official inflation figures may appear relatively modest sometimes, The real inflation rate stands at approximately 8% in developed nations, and that's honestly a conservative estimate. This represents a significant erosion of purchasing power that compounds year after year. Since Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, the dollar was fully decoupled from gold, and now we've just witnessed a 90% currency devaluation. And that is the most staggering loss of purchasing power for anyone who's holding the US dollar. In this environment, Bitcoin is serving as a monetary system that preserves time and value while all the fiat currencies are melting away. It represents the first truly incorruptible savings technology. It is allowing individuals and corporations to store value outside a systematically flawed monetary system. Now, let's examine MSTR's Bitcoin strategy because it has positioned itself very uniquely inside this revolution. In August 2020, Strategy made a historic announcement, an initial Bitcoin acquisition strategy that would transform the company from a software firm into what I am calling the Bitcoin bank. This wasn't just another company buying Bitcoin, though. It was a fundamental reimagining of corporate treasury management. To execute this strategy, MSTR employed multiple capital raising vehicles. First, they issued convertible debt. They raised billions of dollars at extremely favorable returns, terms that would be impossible to obtain for individuals or typical corporate activities. But they were accessible due to the Bitcoin strategy's appeal for forward-thinking investors. The company also engaged in equity issuance. They leveraged its stock premium to acquire more Bitcoin. And this is creating the cycle where Bitcoin appreciation is driving MSTR stock price up. And then the company then issues more shares at a premium to acquire even more Bitcoin. So it's just that infinite money glitch that you hear about sometimes in these circles. Today, Strategy is controlling over 2.5% of all the global Bitcoin supply, and that is an astonishing position for a single corporate entity. This concentration is giving MSTR a significant influence in the Bitcoin market, and it's positioning itself as the cornerstone institution in the emerging Bitcoin economy. What makes MSTR particularly interesting as an investment vehicle is what I call the Multiple NAV Advantage. Unlike a simple Bitcoin holding, MSTR trades at a premium to its net asset value, and this premium has multiple components. First, there is the Saylor Premium, which is named after the executive chairman, Michael Saylor, whose visionary leadership is really commanding market respect. His deep understanding of both monetary history and Bitcoin's technical fundamentals have really established himself as one of the most credible voices in the space. And this is translating into market confidence and a premium valuation. Second, we have the execution premium, which is reflecting Strategy's sophisticated capital deployment strategy. Now, the company's ability to raise capital at very favorable terms and deploy it efficiently into Bitcoin is creating value above and beyond just the mere holding of the Bitcoin. Finally, underpinning everything is the Bitcoin NAV base, and that is simply Bitcoin per share multiplied by Bitcoin's current price. This represents the fundamental value floor for all the MSTR shares. What's most interesting about this premium structure is that as institutional capital is flooding into the Bitcoin market, MSTR's premium will likely expand rather than contract. This is because those institutional investors, they often prefer exposure through established corporate vehicles rather than holding a Bitcoin wallet on their phone in Robinhood, particularly due to regulatory and custody considerations. To fully appreciate MSTR's value proposition, we must understand how it differs from other Bitcoin investment vehicles, and particularly the newly approved Bitcoin ETFs. The Bitcoin ETFs are offering passive vaults with basic exposure. They're providing no strategy, no leverage, no yield potential, and more importantly, they're limited by regulatory constraints and unable to adapt to market conditions. They're essentially really one-dimensional Bitcoin proxies. It's a 1-to-1 ratio when you buy these things. The Strategy Advantage, by contrast, is multifaceted. As an active Bitcoin operating company, MSTR employs strategic leverage and creates synthetic yield opportunities that ETFs cannot do. Saylor exploits market mechanics masterfully. He creates upside optionality beyond Bitcoin's price action. And you see the stock has just traded historically at a multiple. This means that while Bitcoin ETFs will track Bitcoin's price almost exactly, MSTR has the potential to outperform Bitcoin through the strategic capital management and the expanding premium that we discussed earlier. Michael Saylor's approach to Bitcoin accumulation follows what we all call Saylor's Playbook. It's a straightforward yet powerful strategy with 4 key steps. First, you buy Bitcoin and a lot of it. Strategy employs an aggressive acquisition strategy, consistently adding to its holdings during both bull and bear markets. Second, they wait. This might seem passive, but it's actually an active strategy of holding through market cycles, recognizing that Bitcoin's value proposition strengthens over time as adoption increases and monetary debasement continues. Third, they issue equity or debt when market conditions are favorable. Strategy raises capital at a premium to its Bitcoin holdings, allowing it to acquire even more Bitcoin without diluting existing shareholders' Bitcoin exposure. And fourth, they just repeat this. This is the Bitcoin loop machine. It's where each cycle potentially increases the company's Bitcoin holdings per share. This playbook has transformed MSTR from a software company with a market cap of less than $1 billion into a monetary phenomenon that's valued at many times that amount, and it has potential to become one of the most valuable companies in the world if Bitcoin continues this historical trajectory. Now, we got to remember that MSTR is becoming a Bitcoin bank, and we are witnessing the emergence of just a new type of financial institution. This is representing a fundamental innovation in corporate finance and monetary strategy. MSTR operates on what I have termed the sovereign bank model, with Bitcoin reserves backing its operations. This is conceptually similar to how central banks once operated under a gold standard, but with a critical difference. Bitcoin's supply cannot be expanded at will. The company employs a fiat to Bitcoin strategy, issuing debt denominated in depreciating currencies to acquire a deflationary asset. This is creating a very powerful arbitrage where they borrow in a currency that's losing value over time to buy an asset with a structurally limited supply. In many ways, MSTR's approach is mirroring central banking, but with one crucial inversion. It favors savers over debtors. While central banks' policies are typically benefiting debtors through currency debasement, MSTR's strategy is rewarding long-term shareholders through appreciation of the underlying monetary asset. Now, the implications of this strategy extend far beyond its own balance sheet. The company has established itself what we can call the treasury king. It gained the first mover advantage in Bitcoin allocation at the corporate level. This is creating the geopolitical float, the significant monetary influence that will only grow as Bitcoin's importance in the global financial system increases. As a holder of over 2.5% of the Bitcoin that will ever exist, MSTR's decisions are going to impact the broader market. We should also consider MSTR's monetary positioning, and this goes beyond equity. It represents the strategic future positioning in a world where Bitcoin becomes the global reserve asset. If Bitcoin succeeds as that monetary network, MSTR's early and substantial accumulation is going to make it the most influential financial entity in the world. This positioning has implications not just for the shareholders, but for the global monetary system itself. MSTR has created a new model of corporate treasury management, and we're already seeing others following suit, potentially accelerating Bitcoin adoption across the corporate sector. No investment thesis would be complete without addressing both the risks and the rewards. MSTR's Bitcoin strategy presents a fascinating profile that must be carefully considered. Let's first acknowledge the risks. Bitcoin does have a price volatility that does remain significant, with drawdowns or 50% or more. They're not uncommon, and even within bull market cycles, you'll see Bitcoin take a tumble sometimes. Regulatory crackdowns are still possible. It becomes less and less possible as we see global adoption take place. That could temporarily impact Bitcoin price and accessibility. Additionally, there's the potential for over-leveraging if debt issuance outpaces Bitcoin's appreciation over extended periods. So far, though, since the Bitcoin standard era that began in 2020, MSTR has remained pretty critically under-leveraged with its debt holdings. It's actually leveraging debt in a very conservative way. Moreover, MSTR's first mover advantage means that it has secured substantial Bitcoin holdings at prices that will likely never be seen again, and that has created the competitive moat that new entrants cannot replicate. When comparing MSTR to Bitcoin itself, Several key differences emerge that make MSTR potentially more attractive for certain investors. MSTR has consistently outperformed Bitcoin during bull markets due to what we are calling the MNAV leverage, the multiple on the net asset value, as we discussed earlier. As Bitcoin appreciates, MSTR's premium on top of Bitcoin's appreciation tends to expand, creating returns that exceed those of Bitcoin itself. The stock can also offer certain tax advantages in various jurisdictions, particularly for institutional investors who could face regulatory or mandate restrictions on direct crypto holdings. But most importantly, MSTR is functioning as the high beta option on Bitcoin. It is the Bitcoin call option with operational control. This means that investors are getting the amplified exposure to Bitcoin while the company is actively managing the balance sheet to enhance the returns. In conclusion, we need to understand that strategy is a Trojan horse. It is the gateway for institutional Bitcoin exposure that fits within our existing investment frameworks. For many large investors who cannot or will not directly purchase Bitcoin, MSTR offers a familiar securities wrapper with the underlying exposure that they seek. This is a strategic play where Michael Saylor is essentially playing chess in a fiat casino. Michael Saylor is positioning MSTR for what is the greatest monetary shift in history. I encourage you to think like a sovereign, study the playbook that strategy is enacting, and really follow the conviction that's underlying it. This is a rabbit hole of epic proportion, and this short presentation cannot possibly do it justice. It's really not about short-term trading. It's about understanding a fundamental transformation in how value is stored and transferred. What we are witnessing is truly an asymmetric opportunity with world-changing upside potential. The risk, of course, is that Bitcoin fails as a monetary network. But if it succeeds, MSTR's current valuation may represent the greatest investment opportunity of our lifetime. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to address any questions about the strategy thesis I presented today. Feel free to leave a comment below and I will reply. Thank you.